the context like in developing country like Uganda or this kind of country, actually the amount of the resources are really limited. In that situation, actually, even if we have the way to protect certain individual, we cannot do that due to the overpopulation. That's the reason why we want to protect certain individual in the society. That's a fundamental stance coming from open government. In terms of our model, two things. First of all, the overpopulated nation means that some nation that recognizing the resources like food or water and some kind of others per a person is lower than certain criteria. We don't think that deciding the criteria is burden proof of outside of the house. And if a woman bear a 2 baby or more, we punish the man, women who is linked to this action. So mainly three things to talk about. First of all, what kind of context we are talking about. Secondly, why right of individuals is not absolute. And thirdly, why the government should put a priority on the living citizens over potential living food. So considering the context of Uganda or different country, actually so many people are dying due to lack of amount of resources. And we don't, the amount of resources to guarantee the life of the citizens is not enough in the situation. And they might say that the distribution from the government or support from other government is enough or this kind of stuff, but we don't think so. First of all, we do think that the government do not have the capability to guarantee every citizen to distributing the food or the water and so on. Simply, the resources itself is lacking in the world at the first place. And more than that, they might say the other way exists, like the other country, the support that country, like machine or something to improve the land and so on. But considering the context of this country, the land itself is not fertile, and there is no other way to improve that situation. The recognizing that context, what we can say, first of all, the right of individual is not absolute. Why is that? Three reasons. First of all, we do think that when something harms to other people, we don't think the right will be restricted. Considering every kind of legal framework, we think that's right. And secondly, the government is socially accountable to the individual in the society, simply because the government have to guarantee the whole society, the harm principle should be standing in the society. And more than that, concerning the dependency of the citizens on the government, we think that is legitimate. What do I mean by that? Simply, the citizens is dependent on the government in terms of some diplomacy or some like the military or security and so on. And it is a kind of contract between the government and the citizens. And the amount of contribution to the government and the citizen should be equal, should be tantamount as much as possible. That's the reason why, as long as the citizen is dependent on the government, the citizen's right is not absolute. So, far more importantly, why the government should put a priority on the living citizens over potential life, like the baby and so on. We have to consider certainty of the contribution to the government. What do I mean by that? So, we do think that certainty is really important for the government to continue as the government and as a nation and so on. In that situation, the amount of certainty that the individual have and the potential living field have is much different. Simply because we are living, we can directly contribute to society right now. But concerning the potential life, they can't do that because simply they are not alive in that situation. No. And recognizing that point, we think the priority should be put on the individual, the living in the society. Simply, they are the ones who have the right to live in that situation. What we want to do is quite simple. We want to prioritize certain life in the society, not something potential life that would happen in a society. That's the reason why we think that is legitimate.
Do you think in your context where the government is collapsing, this model can work without hidden children?
We don't think the corruption doesn't matter at the first place. If the corruption doesn't matter, actually what we can do, any policy doesn't work. But even if that, that will be maybe explained by my problem. Then we think that in that situation, the amount of resources could be guaranteed simply because we can. Even though it is gradual, we can decrease the consumption of the resource in the country, right? In that situation, we can much more. We can distribute the resources in better way compared with current situation, right? Then in that situation, what will happen is quite simple. That comparatively more citizens can live a life in the country. Comparatively, they can live a life in higher quality than the past. Simply the resources like food and water that is fundamental to continue their life exist in the society, and they can have access to that due to this proposal. But we think the overpopulation itself do have the harm to the people for our society as a whole. That's the reason we think. That's the reason we think that this proposal should be taken. So, considering the fundamentality to live a life and considering the some importance to reproductive rights, we think that the right to live is far more than important, right? Maybe some people will say the reproductive right is important. Yes, we agree, and we concede that women can have a right to reproductive rights because we allow women to bear a baby even if it is one person. But concerning the fundamentality of the individual to live a life, yes, that every citizen should have the right to continue their life, and every citizen should pursue the quality of life in that situation. That's the reason why the government has to guarantee the whole society, the whole opportunity to distribute the resources. So that's the fundamental reason we are proposing. What we told you today is quite simple. Concerning the context, yes, it is really harsh for every individual in society. And considering the human rights, the restriction is legitimate, and we don't think the priority should. We think the priority should be on the living citizen simply because opportunity does matter. That's the reason why we propose.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Let's now call on Leader of the Opposition at the flash of office.
Mr. Speaker, so what we heard from the opening comment is only one thing. Because this is the solution to solve the overpopulated nations. They're trying to say like this is the justification to solve the problem or to protect the citizen on the ground. But Mr. Speaker, what we cannot understand is that we don't think this is the only or the unique way to solve the problem in the first place. We think there are many ways. There are other ways to solve the problem. But more than that, we believe this policy, like instituting the one-child policy, are going to have the detrimental harm, two levels of detrimental harm towards the society. Maybe that is far more counterproductive towards the goal of their side of the house. We're very proud to oppose. So, I'm going to talk about two things in my speech. Mainly talk about two things in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to see why there are no necessity to take this proposal and why the development itself is going to solve the problem. And second, I'm going to explain how this policy is going to rather counterproductive towards the societal harm. Firstly, I'm going to explain about the high highs, and second, I'm going to explain about the population gap between generations, which the China is facing, which is the severe problem China is facing under the status quo. So and the rebuttals are combined in my first point, mainly. So firstly, why there are no necessity to take this proposal. So what we heard from their side of the house is that overpopulation it makes it difficult for the government to allocate the resource, and people are suffering those kind of things. But, Mr. Speaker, the first rebuttal is that as they concede, we have many ways to minimize the problem of this kind of thing. We're giving the humanitarian aid, and we think this is clearly working in those kinds of things. But more than that, even if it is not enough, as they have said, even their side of the house cannot solve the ongoing problem under such scope, because this policy is going to work for the future thing. But more than that, and why we think this is there are other ways to solve the problem in those incidents? Because they never gave you the reason why those people are facing overpopulation in the first place, right? So the reason being those countries are facing with the overpopulation is because firstly their lack of education in those instances, and secondly is because their lifestyle. For example, there are farmers, the first industrial job is the majority of those countries, which needs the many manpower, which needs the human working forces in those instances. That is why those countries are facing those kind of things. So we don't think we think to solve this problem, we think it is good to leave those countries to develop in the first place, and to make the education to prevail in those countries. Like for example, in those countries, why is that? Because for example, if the development has been is going to ongo in those countries, those people's population's lifestyle is going to change, because those people do not are going to have the other job than the first industrial job, which needs many population. Those people are less likely to have too much children, or are going to have fewer children in those instances. That is why, for example, in Europe or even in Japan, when they have go through the development, the population is going to decrease, and it is not so it is decreasing in those incidents. So for example, even so that is why we think that in status quo, countries like Nigeria or Uganda, where the overpopulation is a problem, we see the extremely rapid the progress of development in these countries. We think this kind of thing is going to solve the problem. We don't think there are necessity to take this proposal in the first place. But secondly, why when it is not problematic, given that there are no necessity to solve that problem, why do we think this policy is detrimental? The first level of harm which this policy is going to have is that it is going to have the individual harm towards the Heihais, which means the children who are not registered to the government or those kind of things. So, as I already told you, why farmers are going to have many children in those incidents is because they think it is necessary. Because it is necessary for them to sustain their life. They are necessary. It is necessary for them to give birth to many children rather than only one children. So that is why even under the status quo, for example, even in China, there are children who are not registered because they need those kinds of children. Because the reason they do not they are giving too many children is not because government is not banning those kind of things. It's because it is necessary for those children, for those farmers or those kind of people. So that is why even after the status quo, those people are going to do not register their children and use them as for example as a workforce in their farm or those kind of things. And we think this is extremely harmful towards those kind of children. Why is that? Because they cannot have the support from the government. They are not registered in the government. They cannot assure the education coming from the government. They cannot assure to go to the hospital, which is given by those kind of government. We think this is extremely harmful towards those kind of children. But more than that, second harm is much important. Why? The second harm is that the population gap between the generation, and that collapse the country in the long run in those instances. How do you mean by this? The main problem of the one-child policy, which China is now facing, or the future face in the future, in the short future, is that the population gap between the generation. Why is that? Because in the past, under the status quo, people in Nigeria or Uganda are giving birth to many children. But suddenly, one-child policy is going to take in, and their people are less incentivized to give birth to many children. Children are people the generation, the population in that generation is suddenly gets so small. Become so small in that instance. We think this is detrimental towards the society. Why is that? Because when those kind of incidents happen, what happened to those countries is that those countries are going to face extremely aging society, meaning that over the population of the old person is too large compared to that young generation is very small. We think this is extremely harmful. Why is that? Firstly, because we cannot support those old people who cannot live by themselves, who need the support from the younger generation, cannot sustain their life in the first place. Because the younger generation cannot afford, ensure the tax pay, cannot ensure as a workforces, cannot ensure the welfare, simply because there are less number of people in those incidences. So for those reasons, these kind of generation gap are going to less empower, rather counterproductive towards country to be empowered, to be developed in those instances. That is why this policy are rather going to harm the society, and rather at the end of the day, those countries cannot protect the citizen on the ground, which is the goal of their side of the house. So for those reasons, we are very proud of those.
the case of opening government, let's call on Deputy Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and hello, ladies and gentlemen, today. So what we believe that on the government side, what to do is that we see, like in the photograph, we see those African little children with huge tummies, with very no clothes, just being starved to death. We want to solve those kind of problems. We are not talking about the country, their education exists, there is enough food exists. We are not talking about those countries. What we are talking about is that there is no education in the first place. Living, getting food is a priority to those people. What we want to tackle is those kind of things. The reputation to the. In my speech, I'm going to talk about how it is good for after taking how it's beneficial for individuals. Second, about how those countries is going to be developed more and those kind of things. And third, I'd like to improve, to elaborate why government can remit this in different aspects. So, but before moving on, let me refute our opposition side. Madam Speaker, as my partner already told you, this is the last step of doing this. We're in way of solving the lackage of food. When the opposition come up and say we have a better solution, then we said, oh, that's better for people, and let's listen to them. Then what the opposition gave us is a very useless plan, right? They said, what they only said is let's wait for the development. Mr. Speaker, to wait to develop in the first place, they are justifying that many people dying during those development. We want to stop. We want to tackle this problem. So let's opposition side come up and tackle this problem, right? And the opposition second response coming from opposition is that it's okay because NGO humanitarian aid exists, Mr. Speaker. We say this is ridiculous, Mr. Speaker. We believe that those governments needs to tackle their own problem, right? Because the humanitarian aid is not something, is not firstly not enough in the first place, but secondly, it's not something they can rely on forever, right? They're not the country could happen in any single war, and those aid is going to not happen. Considering the fact the food shortage is happening around the world in the first place, right? So, Mr. Speaker, we believe that it is very necessary to tackle for the government to tackle this problem in the first place. So, first place. Another limitation is that the opposition side talk about because the farmers need the manpower or whatever, Mr. Speaker, we can't see why where there is too many people in the first place. Why is it necessary for your own children to farm the land in the first place? They can hire or another person can farm the land, and we believe that those kind of problem does not the unique problem or important problem in the first place. So, given that, let me move on to what government side is going to say. So, Mr. Speaker, after this plan, we can solve the food package problem by little by little, right? We say that there is limited, as my partner already told you, there is limited resources. We can those fields cannot be developed well because in the first place there is no money to develop the food well. Then because there is because only certain amount of food. For example, there is 1 liter of water, but there is 10 children in the first place. And because just taking this problem, we can decrease the number of population. Why is this? The closing came up and say, why does this work in the first place, Mr. Speaker? We say, Mr. Speaker, in the first place, we believe that because we gave her punishment, we gave it, we are going to imprison, and we are going to force them to pay money. As my partner already explained, this kind of fear, being found, those kind of fear, this limit is going to be the deterrence for each citizen to have their own children. They are going to have less number of babies. They are only going to have one baby because having 2 babies means that they're out of nowhere. They're going to be in prison. Those kind of things. We believe that this plan is going to work, and even if it doesn't work, it's not a problem in this kind of case. So, Mr. Speaker, let's move on. No, thank you. So in this case, like we can surely decrease the number of people, and we believe it's better because of more food is going to be distributed to the individual, right? Under the current situation, what's really happened is that certain very rich number of people have like many number of children. If they're enclosing, like food for themselves, right? But because of even those people can have only one children, what's going to happen is that those people don't have no necessity to enclose their own food for themselves. So what this means is that they're going to more food for even like middle class people, for the poorer people. So we believe in this case we can save more number of people in more number of babies or number of children in the case. Yes, sir.
Why can you say after spring suddenly that selfish rich will turn to a generous and create a Disneyland full of food?
Mr. Speaker, in the first place, because under current situation, those people have many children in the first place, right? Just because one, for those people, they firstly don't need that food for their children. So we say this our plan will work. Now the second, let's move on to the second point for development, right? In the current situation, Mr. Speaker, those countries cannot invest their money to the industry. Why? Because for the country, the most beneficial thing that they have to protect. No, thank you, sir. Is like citizens' life, right? People's life is most important compared to the industry, right? So in this case, in the current situation, when the people are dying so hard, they cannot put their money to the industry, which prevents the country to develop. But after taking this plan, there is going to be space because the food shortage problem is going to be lessened. There is going to be money for government to develop more, can invest their money onto development, can invest more money to the field to buy machinery, more effective machinery for the farmers, which can provide them even more food. So we believe that after taking this plan, our plan is much more beneficial. Why is this? Firstly, the government, because of the less problem on the human life, the government can put more emphasis on the investment, and so that sort of thing, which will actually increase the number of land, number of resources, number of food in general, which can provide more money for the individual. And we say this is very good. This is very good in the first place. And Mr. Speaker, let me move on to the third point about why government can forbid them to have children. Mr. Speaker, when the government must choose between the right between people who are already born and the right between the future, the people's right to have children, when we compare that, when government must compare, it is very important for government to protect the people who are already born. Why is this? Because the poor people who are already born can actually feel pain, can actually feel the pain to starve to death, can already be the fear of not being treated by this medicine. In this case, we believe that it's government's role to protect the existing fear or existing harm to the individual than to the future generation, which is a very vague. So in this case, we would like to propose.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. To end the case of opening up, let's call on Deputy Leader of Opposition, please.
Mr. Chair. Today's opening government says assumption is that small population is beneficial for these developing countries to develop more. But we think that this assumption is wrong because already we see in the status quo, the United States and Brazil or China and India, all countries have big population. That is why they are rising now. And so big population is very necessary for developing countries to develop more. So this is my argument. Before moving my substances, let me review to the government side. Firstly, they said that the cause of the problem of the least developing countries like Uganda is the lack of food or water or resources. But we do not think so. We think it is one of the cause, but we think that the most important cause of the problem in developing countries is that the not lack of resources. Not lack of resources, but poverty. For example, there is no hospitality, or there is no infrastructure, or there is no education. That is why the many people are suffering in the status quo. So the government has to put importance on solving that kind of problem with larger population. And for example, they impose one-child policy on each citizen, but in their context, that in Uganda, there are many farmers. The majority of citizens are farmers, and in that sense, that they say that if they have two and three children, more than one children, the citizens will be in prison. So in that sense, farmers can only one children. And what's going to happen is that the farmers cannot sustain their farming life itself. So this is counterproductive for farmers themselves. That's why the opening government sites want to protect in this debate. So we think that this is more counterproductive for the government to protect the citizens' lives. And secondly, both members of the opening government talked about we have to prioritize the living people, not the people who are now born. But it is out of debate because we did not say that we have to prioritize the people who are not born yet. We think that both sides agree that we have to make the development more for the living citizens itself. So that argument is totally out of debate. So let me move on my arguments. I have two things to talk about. Firstly, why education is more effective, especially for the context which is coming from the opening government sites in the least developing countries. And secondly, I analyze how the manpower and the big population is necessary for developing countries, especially in the process of middle developing countries to develop So let me talk one by one. About the first point, as my partner already said that education is more necessary and is more effective for these developing countries to solve this problem. Because for example, that even in Uganda, the women and men do not know how to prevent the having children with using condom or so. And also they do not have the idea that they have to use condom because they don't know anything about the danger of sex or danger of having too larger number of children. So we think that education is more effective way to solve this problem. And compared to that, even if the government side, closing government side might say that it is okay, we are happy to do both education and one-child policy, but we think that the one-child policy is violation of citizens to choose the lifestyle, as you already explained in my presentation, especially the farmer's lifestyle. So we think that because today's government side's policy can achieve something by violating the human right to choose lifestyle, even if the people in these developing countries think that even people are living in these developing countries, they have the right to choose the lifestyle. So before
how exactly are you going to educate people when you don't have resources to give them basic livelihood like food or water?
Yeah, even so, as we already said that firstly, aid is existing, and we think that because of that, even the food and water there is no food and water is the complete assumption from government side. So let me move on. My second argument is that how the larger number of manpower is necessary for developing countries to develop more and more. No, thank you. For example, let's think about the case of Uganda. In Uganda, majority of people are farmers. So if there are more and more farmers, they can make more and more food, and they can sell more and more food to the foreign countries by trade. In that sense, the government have more benefit from trade, and also each farmers can get more benefit, more income from trading by selling foods. So no, thank you. So standard of each citizen's income will be increasing to some extent, and that's so that and after that, because the benefit of government is increased by trading, they can provide more and more facilities to the people, and firstly, the living standard of the citizens is increasing, and also because the government can provide education more and more people, and also the citizens have more income compared to the status quo, so that they can afford to make their citizens to go to have education. And the people, if people can get education, the who educated students can get more and more high salary job after the development, and such educated people come back to their home and come back to their home country, and they start business and they build the company in the developing countries to hire more and more citizens and to produce the benefit, and that kind of the benefit of the company will go to the government, because the government can take tax from the company. So in that sense, from those mechanisms, we can see manpower, the big population, is very necessary for developing countries to develop more, and this is the very big and important goal of both sides. So when we compare both situations, we see that the opposition side's paradigm is actually achieving the goal. That's why we oppose.
Thank you, that the leader of opposition open